You are listening to the Savage FINcast, episode 113, an interview with Dean Haspiel and Dave Kelly.
Chicago. A criminal mastermind called Overlord held our city in his terrifying grip. Ordinary cops were losing the battle against Overlord's super freaks and mutants. Then, a miracle happened. When I found him, he had no memory of his past. I helped him find an identity and a life. Now we have a fighting chance. Now we have the dragon.
This is the Savage FINcast, the show that won't fake the funk on a nasty dunk. My name is Jim Purcell.
I'm Craig Olson.
I'm Raven Perez.
And we are here for a very special episode of the Savage FINcast, the internet's only Savage Dragon-related, Eric Larson-related podcast. We're going to be interviewing a really interesting couple of comic creators. We are joined with creator of the Red Hook, Dean Haspiel, and creator of the Night Watchman, Dave Kelly, who, of course, have come together to produce a series of backups for Savage Dragon over the last several issues. I was going to say several months, but we know how that actually goes. So we are going to go right into the interview, as previously recorded, and I hope you enjoy.
All right, so we're here with Dave Kelly, Dean Haspiel, writers for the Bride of Wax backup with Red Hook and some characters from the Night Watchman series, both create their own characters from the two. I'm very familiar with Dean's work. Dave's stuff was new to me, and I got to go back and read through his own comic, and also revisited a lot of the Red Hook stuff to get myself kind of immersed into this backup, which was a fun jaunt over Savage Dragon 259, 260, and 261. So welcome to the show, guys. I'm really looking forward to kind of talking to you about the series, picking your brain about your own characters, and just getting into Savage Dragon and how you got involved in this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks for doing a deep dive, too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost ashamed to say that. So I read the first trade of the Red Hook, and I guess I just never put two and two together that there were so many other, I guess, seasons, what you would call it, on the Webtoons website. And I also didn't understand how connected it was to other characters. I'm thinking of... is it the Aquarius or Aquaria?
All right, so I think this is, if I may, I might help arrange what's the disarray that is the Red Hook. So, not to diss, I'm not dissing Webtoon here, but one of the things that Webtoons, I think, made a mistake at doing was the 4.5 seasons, or let's call them 5 seasons, I did of the Red Hook on Webtoon, are all titled differently. Right? Whereas most of their series, they'll have a season and then they'll add, 26 more episodes or however many episodes it is per season to the pre-existing title. For some reason, they wanted me early on to go from Red Hook, and then season 2 would be called something else. And then if I did future seasons, we called them something else. And the order of the Red Hook on the Webtoon is the Red Hook, season 1. Season 2 is called Warcry. Season 3 is called Starcross. Season 4 is called Blackout. And Season 5 is called Post-Traumatic Superhero Disorder, PTSD for short. But it got smudged in with at the end of Blackout, right? But what it really should have been is the Red Hook all the way through those stories, those seasons, okay? So a lot of people didn't know there was a second season, a third or fourth, whatever, right? So, and eventually, I think I convinced them. I think if you go to the end of all those seasons, it might say, go read Warcry or go read whatever, right?
Yeah, right. It says it right in the beginning now.
Oh, good. So, but that kind of messed up, my metrics, my numbers. People didn't realize that Warcry was with the Red Hook comic and so on and so forth. Also, to speak to Aquaria, that's a character I very slightly co-created with Adam McGovern, the writer, and Paolo Leandri, I think, the artist, right? A very Kirby-esque type style art. And the reason I think you're bringing it up is because that character has appeared as a backup in Savage Dragon, I think about 2 times now. So, and there's a loose connection that Aquaria never outright said that Aquaria is in New Brooklyn, but basically Aquaria is in New Brooklyn. We just never really settled on that, me and Adam. And every time we talk, it's as if Aquaria is a part of this New Brooklyn universe. And just to go back to Webtoon for a second, sorry, there's a lot of minutia for your listeners. There's 2 other characters associated to the New Brooklyn universe that the Red Hook is a part of on Webtoon, which is the Purple Heart and the Brooklyn Knight. And so those were like the 3 characters, and those were other creative teams. And the Purple Heart by Vito Del Sante and Ricardo Venancio. And the Brooklyn Knight was written and co-created by the late Seth Kushner, who's a former studio mate of mine who passed away, and drawn by Seamus Bial and Jason Gunvor. So they built out, and then in fact, the Red Hook also appeared in a little mini solo story alone in the back of Savage Dragon as well.
So did Webtoons? I don't know how Webtoons worked. Did Webtoons approach all of you guys to like create this shared universe, or did it just happen to end up at Webtoons because it was a platform that was?
Good. It's a good question because where did that come from, right? So Tom Akel was the editor that approached me when he worked there, and I think he was basically trying to recruit certain American artists to the American platform or version of Webtoon.
Right.
Okay. And he knew that I was a webcomics guy since at least 2006 when I founded and curated Activate on LiveJournal blogging platform. And then we started our own website after that. So that was a webcomics site. And then I've also done stuff at Zuda and, I've done digital comics. I've done, webcomics basically since 2006. The majority of my work started as a webcomic. And so when Tom approached me and said to pitch something, I pitched him about 2 or 3 things. And the one he liked the most was the Red Hook. And then I was at a studio with other creators, and we had been thinking about building out this kind of universe that I had called New Brooklyn. And I basically wooed and convinced Tom Akel and Webtoon to greenlight not 1 series, but 3, starting with the Red Hook, launching the New Brooklyn universe. And then I believe it was then the Purple Heart and the Brooklyn Knight. But as it was kind of building out, I've got other friends I'm working with and talking to, right? And like Adam McGovern with Aquarius. And then eventually Dave Kelly approached me about doing a crossover with the Night Watchman, his character. And that's where we co-created Luna, which appears in the current 3-part story, Bride of Wax.
Right.
We've actually worked on several crossover ideas with the Red Hook and his characters, and I don't know if Dave wants to speak on that at all.
Well, the fun part is, we're talking about a story that we started 2 years ago, right before COVID insanity, and I have to go back and I had to do a lot of rethinking today about what the heck actually happened. How did we start this story? And, here we are 2 years later and it's finally out there. But, Dean and I had such a great collaboration doing the crossover that, I think we wanted to do something else. We wanted to elevate the profile of the crossover a little bit. So, we thought it'd be cool to take Red Hook back to where he came from in Savage Dragon and talk to Larson about doing a backup story. And we knew we wanted to keep it short and tight and fun. So we just kind of came up with this very irreverent Valentine's Day tale. And it's really a Red Hook story. Dragon, Luna, they all kind of pop in for a cameo, and we use some of the villains from the crossover. But it was fun to be able to write a Red Hook story. It was very different for me.
You did a good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So back in, I guess it was probably 2016, the first Red Hook story in the backup of Savage Dragon. I don't know if it was the first printed story, but you had a trade, but I don't know.
I wanted to ask that question real quick because I actually was going over the credits page in the trade paperback I got and see that it was credited in Dark Horse Presents. And actually, I have a recollection of reading that story in Dark Horse Presents back when it came out. Of course,
that's a different story. Is that Jim? Jim.
That's me.
I think you're looking at the indicia and trying to figure it out. There was a 3-part story I did in Dark Horse Presents called Emotional Ebola that was reprinted in the first volume of the Red Hook. And at the very end of it is, I think, a 6-page story that is one of basically the first Red Hook story I did in 2012, just kind of winging it and trying to figure out what this character was for me. And I don't know if that the 6-page version or the 4-page version, because I added a bookend, a front page and a back page to this middle story. And I can't remember if all 6 pages were printed in Savage Dragon backup or not. But also, I mean, just to speak real quickly to where the Red Hook comes from, I sometimes go to this residency called Yaddo in Saratoga Springs, New York. And when I go there, one of the things I want to do is not do comics. I want to write a novel. I want to write a play. I want to just do something else besides comics. I'm always doing comics, which is great. But after a while, it can drive you a little nuts, just working in one format. And so as a palate cleanser, the first night I was at Yaddo in, the summer of 2012, I had this kind of thing scratching the back of my head. And it was like, well, what if 2 of my favorite cartoonists, Jack Kirby and Alex Toth, got together and created a character? And I thought about that. And somehow the Red Hook arrived. It was basically a super thief who's not really a bad guy, he's just a thief, and he didn't even have some of these powers that are granted him in the first season. But I was just playing with this idea. It was kind of a cross between like Daredevil, Wildcat, and the Fox. And in fact, that story I drew was kind of like what got me the Fox gig that I would eventually do for Archie for a few years. And so some people think, oh, you're just doing a version of the Fox because of the ears, and it's like a red version, and he's blue, or whatever. And no, I mean, he was semi-influenced visually. But yeah, I actually did Red Hook before I ever did the Fox. And it was like kind of an audition piece, as it were. But yeah, that's what I think finally, it was the first printing of a Red Hook story, possibly in Savage Dragon. I think so.
And how did you link up with Eric on that? Was that something that you just kind of showed Eric? And so what do you think? Would you run it in the back, or was he?
Eric, I love Eric Larson. He's just, he is what he is, like there's no bones about it. With
super
him.
Blunt.
Blunt and just, and I can't, I had met him and we hit it off. And I'm trying to remember, like, I guess I must have had his email, and I know that he does backups. And sometimes it just seems like he's, a friend will reach out and, put something back there. So in the spirit of that, I think I just wrote him and said, hey, I got this short story. Do you have a space for it? And, like a week or so goes by, and he goes, yes, send me the files for, it might have been something that was immediate or like months off. I don't remember at the time.
Yeah.
And, it's not like he's paying anything. It's just the privilege of being in the back and getting some eyes on it,
And that's what I think, we've spoken about, is that what we love about Savage Dragon, not only is the main story, but getting a taste of these backups and getting exposed to things you would have maybe kind of glanced over and not really picked up off the stands. And with Red Hook, like I said, I'm ashamed that I didn't dive into the webtoons. I just didn't know about it. I had the first trade, but I actually prefer the webtoons version of scrolling down and seeing that. And then having 4 seasons just to dive into. The characters are so diverse. You go from street level hero to a cosmic kind of story. It in many ways kind of mirrors what I like about Savage Dragon and Jack Kirby's work and things like that. So, I think it's perfect for fans of Savage Dragon, just the sheer amount of different characters, just the love of having, a fisticuff and a fight, but then have just more than that, there's an underlying love story.
Like you said, it's street level, it's cosmic, it's romance. Got a lot of diverse characters. The Red Hook almost is. I mean, it's his point of view, but there's so many cool characters that happen, and I barely scratched the surface of that in that little backup. And in fact, I don't even think I say it's a webtoon comic. Like you would never know.
We didn't. I didn't know, at least.
and that's something that Eric doesn't necessarily do. He doesn't. In the letters page, there's going to be some back matter, but it's not really advertised. It's just whatever he got that month or something, right? So yeah, I really appreciate that. You again doing a deep dive and discovering this stuff, and I feel like webtoon is so popular. But one of the things about webtoon is it has a million comics on it. You can easily get lost, even if you're up on the top banner for 2 weeks. Webcomics readers are very fickle. Like what they like. It's free, but they still complain, whatever. And so and with Image Comics publishing the first 2 volumes, we kind of put a hold on it because it wasn't doing that well in the comic shop, because it is a free webcomic online on your phone right now in your pocket. And then this volume will come out once a year. And, there's only so much promotion I can do, grassroots style. And so I put a hold on it because I figured, well, let me just publish like an omnibus somehow at some point. That'll be with Image or someone else. But let me tell this new Brooklyn saga, about the Red Hook. Now that story is done, and don't get me wrong, I have a lot more stories to tell. It's just not going to be a webtoon anymore. And then I got to figure out a publishing plan, and I do think it's a print publishing plan because, I wasn't in the comic shop for a while, and I used to be, a semi, visitor in the comic shop, with my work. So, but thankfully Dave Kelly kind of keep, working with Dave, there's a little cameo here. He comes out once in a blue, and Dave, talk about the first, it was like was it a 40-page story? The first crossover?
It was 48 pages.
48 pages.
48 pages. Yeah. Well, I remember being in the studio with you and Brett Hobson, and it was right after issue 7 of Tales of the Night Watchman came out, and we were just chatting. I think one of us, I thought it was you, but this is one of those things in hindsight. Like, I feel you came to me, you feel that I came to you, but we started discussing the crossover that day.
Probably.
And it just seemed like the right idea, and it had always been in the back of my mind. What's that?
You're reminding me. I think one of the things I was pitching you was like, you have a Brooklyn character, I have a Brooklyn character, and there are some Brooklyn characters starting to emerge even more so. And with the new Brooklyn universe, I was like, they should have a little story that they happen. I didn't know. I didn't know it was going to be 48 pages. But it started off with like this idea of like, oh, they should, and then I had to figure out, guys, because Webtoon was publishing a Red Hook story during the New Brooklyn era, which is a very different facet of Brooklyn. I realized I had to tell a pre-New Brooklyn story so that I could legally tell the story and not, ruffle feathers at Webtoon. So that was another thing. So he's only been a thief, I think, in Dave's stories.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, I think, that is true. And, I never sit down to write a 48-page story. It just kind of happened that way. I always wish I could write shorter stories, but I think I finally accomplished that with Bride of Wax. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like a no-brainer that, these characters should get together and do some damage. And I think it had been on my mind, and I was just a little too shy to ask at that point, but it was the right moment. And and I'm very happy with how both of the stories turned out. I mean, it was a lot of fun working with Dean, and I had always wanted secretly to do something in Savage Dragon as well. I loved the Twisted Savage Dragon funnies, which Dean was a part of, and that was a long time ago. But that was something that turned me on to the concept of running these short little backup stories, and I thought that would be awesome to do. I would love to be a part of that someday.
And it was cool that Eric was open to letting us tell a Savage Dragon story, essentially, because he's in it.
Oh, that was the best part. Yeah.
And he had
because we weren't sure
about it, and caveats, which was cool.
Yeah, we weren't sure what he was going to say to that because we were like, well, I would rather, use the original dragon if possible. Is he going to let us? And yeah, he was basically fine with it. And at first he was like, well, he's dead, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, no, we know. They go back in time. It's a time travel story. And then he was cool with that. We're like, oh, thank God. So yeah, it worked out great. It was a lot of fun. And to be able to use that character, to say that I've written Savage Dragon, that I've written the original dragon is amazing. And I'm very thankful for that opportunity.
Also, wasn't there something about his blood that you had to tweak?
Well, there were a couple things we had to work around. There's a lot of continuity to Dragon, and I've been as tuned in as I can. I've always loved the character. My first exposure to him was the cartoon show in the 90s. I came to the comic books a little bit later. I have not read every issue of Savage Dragon, as much as I love the character. So there were some things about him that I didn't know, and there was a lot of discovery. And, Eric was very, very willing to walk us through those continuity issues and let us know what we could and could not do. And he was very particular about how Dragon looked, how the face looked, how the fin looked. And then the issue with the blood is that we were like, well, we wanted that to be kind of the kicker. It is a Valentine's Day story, so hearts and blood and all that kind of stuff had to be involved. And I think we had written the first draft of the script, and we'd shown Larson everything along the way. And then at the end, he was like, well, you can't actually use Dragon's blood, right? We're like, because if he did, he would turn into a dragon and explode. That's happened a couple times. And we're like, oh yeah, no, we knew that. And so we went back and made a couple quick revisions, and we made it work. And I'm happy with how it came out. And so it kind of became a story where Dragon is along for the ride, and he's not taking the situation too seriously. He's like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is here. And by the way, you guys actually can't do what you think you can do with my blood. So gotcha. And that was kind of a fun thing to write.
I'm not gonna lie. I kept expecting that last panel, for Mannequin's girlfriend or wife to grow a fin and explode or something. Everybody leaves. Everyone thinks it's a happy ending, and then she explodes.
Yeah. Well, and we don't know what happens after that. Red Hook just went on his merry way. It was Valentine's Day. He had other priorities. What happened after that is not his business.
We got a sequel.
Yep.
Did Eric
have we've also we're hatching another story, not necessarily with Savage Dragon, although we did think about using him at one point in another kind of crossover story, right? Dave,
the whole original story that you and I talked about was not the story that we did, and I don't even remember why. I guess it must have been the time travel element that we had to go back in time. Because we wanted to use the original Dragon ultimately. That was why we nixed it. But yeah, we do have this other crossover idea where we've kind of removed a couple of the characters as it's progressed. And who knows if we'll ever get to do that. Who knows who that third character is going to be. But we do have that story there. And that was kind of how it originated.
Right.
That's really cool.
And that's a fun story, too, that I hope we get to do someday. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
Dave, I was following you on Instagram. I feel like towards maybe over the last 6 months, and you were over in Europe for quite a while. Were you touring comic shops? Are you a big fan of European comics, or what's your background?
Well, my background is that I have a whole lot of heavy metal, and some people understand that, some people don't. Some people get a little freaked out by it. I love it. I have almost every issue. So I haven't traveled internationally in a long time, and I took the first opportunity I could to go visit some friends. And so it took me to Copenhagen, and there's an incredible store there called Pharaoh's Cigar, which is named for the Tintin story. And it means, the Pharaoh cigars. You go in there, and they've got everything. They have they have Mobius, they've got Hugo Pratt, all the great stuff. And what they do is they don't just sell the comics, they actually publish Danish translations. So you go in there and you're like, this is their own stuff. They'll take what Casterman publishes, do their own thing, slap their own label on it, and it's for the Scandinavian market. It's pretty outstanding. And you go in there like, this is Mobius stuff that I can't get in America right now. So it's a stunning thing to see. And then there are a lot of great shops in the UK, like Gosh in London, and OK Comics in Leeds. There's a lot of great stuff out there. But as far as my background goes, I started doing Tales of the Night Watchman about 10 years ago with my partner at the time, Laura Antal, and it's a series about baristas who fight monsters, and it's got, some street level sensibilities about Brooklyn, but it's more of a monster comic. It's a little more heightened genre than what Red Hook is. But that's basically what I've done, and that was what led me to this point.
And is he the same artist that did this backup for Savage Dragon? He looks like it's the same artist.
Oh yeah, Brett Hobson, right? No, so I co-created the series with Laura Antal. She's off doing other stuff now. She's got a graphic novel with Abrams coming out this year.
Sorry, I'm mixing it up.
Yeah. So no, it's all good. There have been many different artists along the way. In fact, I was the first person to publish Molly Ostertag, who's gone off to work for Disney. She's done 3-book series with Scholastic. She did 2 issues of The Night Watchman as well. So, but for this story, Brett Hobson, he did both the crossover and Bride of Wax, and he's got some more work coming up with me that we haven't published yet.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy. I love him.
And then one of the things with the series, with the 3-parter, it seemed like it took probably about a year for this to come out with COVID and then Eric's schedule. Yeah. I know he had writer's block for the first time, I think he said, in 30 years or something crazy. So it felt like at times we were never going to get a conclusion. And then at one time, I don't know if you guys caught this, but he had mentioned even on the boards that he thought of throwing in the towel, which shocked the hell out of us. Really?
Well, when I heard you guys talk about that in the podcast for 259, my stomach just sank because I had no idea that was going on. We're like, okay, it's COVID, shit's crazy, things get delayed. I haven't published anything either, so no big deal. And then I heard that, I'm like, oh my god, please don't let that happen. Thankfully, it all came out, and here we are.
Was he the first creator to acknowledge COVID in a comic book?
Yeah, I think so, at least. And he still does. He has his characters wearing masks and I mean, the cool thing about Savage Dragon is that it's, as you guys know, it's written in real time. So, you can always pick up a book and know what was going on at the time, whether it was Bill Clinton as president or, COVID going on, which is kind of a neat aspect.
Yeah, for sure.
I love the porny stuff he's been doing. It's not porn, it's humor to me. It's so, it's a love story. It's a certain kind of love story, I just love that he's entered that phase and he does not give a fuck. I don't know if I can curse, but
Please do.
It's unapologetic Savage Dragon,
I see some of those parallels with the Red Hook comic when I was reading it. It's just use the comic as the medium as you can do anything. And I hate when people constrain themselves, especially in superhero comics. It's like, and Eric said it before, you've got $1 billion budget on the page, just do whatever you want to do. And it doesn't always have to make sense. It just has to be fun and tell a good story.
Yeah, but Eric is the right artist for Savage Dragon. There's stuff I've written in the Red Hook that I'm not the right artist for. But I just say, fuck it. I'll try, do my best to my abilities, and basically just conveying an idea anyway. A lot of the work is in your own head as you read it. I'm not trying to. I also want you to turn pages and read panels. I don't want you to stop an oval because I feel like that can hurt a rhythm sometimes. So I'm not trying to vogue on the page, and make you see how great an artistic diva I am. I'm more of a storyteller than like an illustrator, if that makes sense,
Yeah. I think Raven has a lot to say on this, and Jim too, about the sex in Savage Dragon, but it's amazing to me how turned off people are with it. When you see stuff like this in movies all the time, but it's drawn in a comic that's been an adult, book or whatever Eric wants it to be at the time, which is also great. If he decides he wants to make it a Fantastic Four style book, it's a Fantastic Four style book. He wants it to have some X-rated stuff, it has that. He wants it to be a cowboy book, it'll be a cowboy book, a Western book. It's like that as a reader to me is what excites me about that book. And what
it reminds me of I can only imagine this is how I would feel if I was doing Savage. It allows me to be 12 years old all the time. And that means that doesn't mean the mind of 12-year-old, but the spirit of that, like, you're a kid again, things feel naughty and new and energized, and also he's an older grown man now. You gotta draw stuff that will keep you interested in the whole damn series,
Yeah, whether it's bending the genre or doing panel tricks or which are always pretty cool to see him.
As an artist, somehow he's only getting better. His inking alone, unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's got such a team working with him on colors and letters, and he's amazing.
It'll always drive me crazy when older fans will say he did better in the past, when it's clear that he's just gotten better with age.
Absolutely.
Speaking of like presentation, that kind of thing, I was wondering, like, Webtoons, of course, has its own style, that vertical scrolling forever style, which is, I've never gotten quite into it myself, but it's really popular with a lot of people. What was it like how did it start? Did it start with you doing traditional comic pages and then transferring it to that style, or did you start that way and go back, or like what was the process there?
Well, when Tom Makel, showed me Webtoon on my phone, and I saw there was a vertical scroll that you just pull up with your thumb, I realized, it's a roll of toilet paper. Okay, I can wrap my head around it. It's the same width, but as long as you want it to be. And then I realized, oh crap, as I started, because I drew all the pages of Red Hook are drawn like traditional comic book pages.
Right.
Okay. But one of the things I had to consider was the vertical scroll. So it meant eventually I had to really start to lose the landscape, probably lose the inset panel. If you look at, if you're aware of any of my print first comics, as it were, I love inset panels. I was a student of Howard Chaykin, who used a lot of inset panels, and I don't think there are any in the Red Hook, So I had to kind of lose the inset panel. I had to think more in terms of a tall panel, right, or a thin panel, because that works better in the scroll, because you're just pulling down. I realized that as you're pulling down, like in a comic book, you're going left to right and then turning a page, and hopefully there's a reveal, right, on the left side. In a vertical scroll, it's always the bottom of the thing. You're just pulling to the bottom of stuff. So I started thinking sometimes about the action occurring at the bottom of the panel, knowing that that's how the reveal would happen. And then also doing little tricks, like if I drew a big panel, or if I do a splash page, I can maybe cut out certain parts of that splash page to either introduce or to exit a sequence, and get, milk a splash page for like 3 or 4 panels, depending, So I had to think a lot about the structure, and not get too caught up in the vertical scroll being some kind of, like, how do you reinvent that all the time to make it work? And then I noticed later on that a lot of webtoons or webcomics seem to be a lot of talking heads anyway. There's a lot of soap opera type stuff happening, right? And then there'd be a little bit of action, and then if you're punching, maybe you're punching down, and then they're flying backwards and instead of up or whatever. It really depends, I would try to mix it up a little bit. But
that's interesting to me on its own, because as we know, in a traditional comic, you go left to right, and action generally should flow in that direction. And of course, you got the turn the page, get the surprise sort of thing. But when you're doing the vertical scroll, it's completely different, like logic, I suppose.
Yep. And there's a lot of parts of panels and certain page designs that has not been seen yet, because you'll see it how it's supposed to be in the print version. But I did honor, I believe, the vertical scroll as best as I could. I never got any crap for it. The only thing Webtoon asked me to do that I kind of disagreed with, and I think it's even evident in the work, was when the first season I had a limited color palette. Basically, the world was kind of like a beige, warm gray type of world, and then all the characters had a featured color, let's say, right? Red Hook.
I did notice that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then with Warcry, they were like, can you go more 4-color, like full color, right? Like every color they get. And I'm not a good colorist. I gotta say, I can't think that way. I think more in terms of a limited palette. But I took the challenge. I did the best I could, and Warcry and Starcross are done more of a full color palette. I don't really like what I did. And then when Blackout came, I knew there was going to be a certain switch in there. I kind of went back to a more limited palette, kind of more of a blue hue. And I think I carried that through PTSD. And, you know, I look at color like a tone. I've worked with great colorists. They do a better job, you know, and if I have any thoughts, I add them. But, yeah, I'm not a big fan of doing a full color on my person.
Have you checked out Larson's Ant series at all that he put out? I think you would dig the colors. It's very similar where the ant kind of pops and it's got like the gradients, but all the characters in the background are flat.
That's great.
And it's a real limited palette. It's really experimental and fun, but it did remind me of kind of what you did with the first season of Red Hook, where I like it because it feels like the main character just pops on the screen. Your eyes are drawn to the red.
And also, who cares if the car is blue and the tree is green and brown? Like, we already know that. So
yeah,
it's a little bit easier. Actually, sometimes it's a little harder to work in a limited palette because you have to how you separate stuff and make sure you're looking at what the reader is looking what you want to look at. But ultimately, I just like when a world feels glued, like it feels like it's its own little kind of. And because in this case, Brooklyn has seceded. Brooklyn is sentient, and her heart is broken by the toxicity of the world, and she literally and physically secedes from New York, ergo America, to start her own republic, where arts can be bartered for food and services during a pandemic of superheroes kind of emerging, from this kind of cosmic fallout. And that's kind of like the genesis of New Brooklyn, and that's why we have all these different characters and stories. But the anchor is the Red Hook.
So much of the Red Hook story revolves around aspects of love and loss, and whether it's person to person or a love of the community, which I think throughout this whole series, it's a love letter to Brooklyn and all the different areas. But I've seen that throughout your work, the Billy Dogma. My first experience with your work was Brawl with Michelle Fife.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I think I kept mixing up your studio with, was it Joe Kelly? Who worked with Tom Scioli on Godland?
On Godland with Tom. Doesn't he do everything by himself, basically?
No, Tom. I forget who wrote it. Jim. Who was the writer of Godland?
Oh, it was Joe Casey, right?
Joe Casey. I kept mixing up your studio with his studio, and I knew I'd seen your stuff, and it was very Kirby-esque. And I bought Brawl, thinking I was gonna get like a superhero Kirby comic, and it looked like that, but it was like an indie, like crazy love story that like I just didn't know what to make of it. Like it wasn't what I thought I was getting.
Right.
And with that, and it was my first exposure to Michelle Fife stuff. It was such a crazy comic to me, and the story burned into my brain because I almost didn't know what was going on the whole time, but it still made sense. If that makes sense, I don't know, but it was just wild. And I noticed that same theme kind of flows in through Red Hook. A lot of like what is it for you with exploring the aspects of love or lost love that you gravitate towards?
I mean, it's probably the stuff I responded to most as a kid to stories, right? Like everyone likes what they like, and for some reason, I don't know if it has to do with like my own family upbringing or something, or I don't know what kind of tragedy or something great that's happened. I can't speak to that, but like my favorite superhero is the Thing from the Fantastic Four, kind of like the misunderstood monster with a heart of gold, right? Like to me, or the Frankenstein monster, or the tragedy of the Hulk, and I've always thought about I think about feelings of abandonment and yet I think about loyalty, how loyalty is important for better or for worse. But ultimately, I think the way we connect with each other isn't necessarily through fisticuffs, but through trying to understand each other through love in some way, And I don't even mean, I'm talking about sexualizing it. Of course, there's that too, but empathy for one another, and trying to not only work that out and figure it out, but also to impart it. Like, one thing you learn is, as a cartoonist or any kind of storyteller, you're a communication artist, right? You're trying to communicate ideas.
Right.
And, when I was younger, I was like into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and, bloody, gory stuff like anybody else. But there's nothing you can do with that, like, except just it's sensational and gross, right? Or fucked up or something. But what I started to realize is I could do stories like that, but what's the takeaway? And so I committed to the idea at one point, well, if I'm going to work on a long piece or a longer piece, or even the shorter ones I do these days, like the takeaway is there's got to be a sense of hope. There's got to be a sense of, something that's meaningful. And again, I'm not even talking about teaching. I'm talking about what I think, I want you to pick up what I'm laying down, and especially, weirdly enough, these days, today, whatever is going on in the world, forget COVID, there's such a disparity and diversity. It's kind of weird how bad it's gotten. We all thought it was just getting better. No, it's getting worse. How is that possible? And we need to learn from that. But if you're going to pick up something I've written and drawn, I hope you're entertained, but I hope you walk away feeling something. I want you to feel something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, just there's reading that Red Hood comic, like you said, there's the fisticuffs, but the message of love, and there's so many different aspects of it in there. Whether it's with Red Hook's mother, the Coney losing her husband, Red Hook losing, his girlfriend, or trying to replace her with someone he doesn't feel for, or I think it's Sundog and Rajak. It's just, and like you said, New Brooklyn itself and its heart, and in the story where the Purple Heart story goes, and he's actually the heart, working for the heart of New Brooklyn. It's all comes down to love. The cosmic story. I mean, I think there's even a part where isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one of the demigods. There's a connection to Billy Dogma there, and I'm glad you brought up the Sundog Rajak thing, because I realized at one point they started to fall in love. Let's say these two guys, and then that doesn't happen because you have to read the story. But then there's a moment later where they're able to have an entire relationship, like in 24 hours, in one day or something. And I could have had more time. I could expand on that. But I love putting those ideas in people's heads because, as I get older, I keep joking with my studio mate, Whitney Matheson, there's only 5 minutes left. And not that I live a life like, there's only 5 minutes left and I don't have anxiety or anything, or I'm not living the best 5 minutes of my life. But you have to realize it's over in a minute, So try to enjoy. It's so easy to get upset these days. It's so easy to complain. And if I'm going to sit at an art table and draw a comic that 5 people are going to read and, eat peanut butter sandwiches just to get by, then I'm going to put time into something that explores love, expresses love, imparts love. And I know that it sounds cheesy what I'm saying, but you've read the comic, so it's got fights and consequences and other things going on. But the underlying theme is this romance thing. It's not even erotica; it's just romance.
It's funny, like Craig was saying. Love is just such a core theme to it. I mean, it was really like I was okay. The only Red Hook exposure I had before this was the little Red Hook one shot in Dragon. and then the 3-parter in 259, 260, and 261. So, I mean, when I go and I do my little Webtoons deep dive, I just wasn't prepared for that. And I got to tell you that I really think that that is honestly not only a super excellent strength that Red Hook has, like compared to, say, an Invincible even. But also, I think it's kind of like what makes it unique, because you set up sort of like this dystopia, with New Brooklyn's kind of like it's retreats away from the America, and it's kind of like everything's like chaos, but you don't get a dystopia. Instead, what's cool is you get this sort of deep dive into love and interpersonal connections. And you even do kind of a thing where you sort of lay out some almost societal commentary with the technological austerity, like the retreat from that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I just think it was really kind of cool. I'm not going to spoil anything, because I really would like people to do that read on Webtoons for themselves. I was very shocked by where it went. And I think it's really unique in comics and in entertainment in general.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate you guys doing that deep dive. I'm shocked. Like, there's a lot of material there, and I really appreciate it. And I'm glad you dug it. Like essentially what I arrived at. I didn't start off the Red Hook doing this, but at the end of the day, it's a mother-son story. It's about a mother and son, and you have to read it to know what I'm talking about. And I've already plotted most of the next story, and I have a title for it that I'll never get away with in today's culture. But just to give you a hint, the title's called "Son of a Bitch." The Red Hook, you'll appreciate. That's the working title. So.
Yeah, that mother-son, that 5-minute dialogue, that I'm being super vague on purpose, but that 5-minute dialogue and that mother-son interaction, that stuff floored me. That was fantastic.
Thank you, Ravens.
I think this recent 3-parter in Savage Dragon really does a good job of giving a little bit of a taste, but I don't think that you can fully understand what's going on in the comic unless you at least read like the first season or something. It gives you a little taste of how the character behaves, what some of the themes are. Again, there's the love theme in the short story. Of course, it's all based around Valentine's Day too, and it helps you kind of understand some of the basics. But like I said, I wasn't prepared, like Raven said, of where the story was going to take me, and just how different it was than what you expect from a superhero comic, which is great. It's refreshing. I mean, we know it's 2022. There's been a billion superhero comics. It's hard to come up with something new and refreshing. And so, I enjoyed it. I'm halfway through season 3. I'm looking forward to getting through this. I did hear, are you on the last, you said you're on the last season with Webtoons, and then you're thinking about doing something in print with this character, or?
So if you're on season 3, which is Starcross, you didn't even know how season 3 ends. It's crazy.
I'm 3/4 through season 3.
I finished it, and he is in for a total. He's in for some wild shit.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. No, but I am wrapped up at Webtoon as of Blackout will go into PTSD in the same season, as it were, and then I'm wrapped there, and then like I said, I have a story that I want to do. I have a couple of stories already kind of lined up, but I don't have a publishing plan. I do think it should be in print. I know we live in a digital age right now, but I've been missing the bookstore. So I think one of the ideas is to probably put out an omnibus of all that stuff on Webtoon, right? That's one story. Then this would be the quote continuing adventures. Okay, spoiler: Red Hook doesn't die. At least there's that. You're doing more Red Hook. I'm not saying who dies or not, but he doesn't die. And then I would, a part of me, and I don't know if you guys, we were talking about format with the vertical scroll, but and I talk about this with Dave a lot, but a part of of me is thinking about there's a sweet spot to like a 64-page or a 48-page. You know, it has a spine. It can be in a bookstore. Maybe you do 2 or 3 of those and you collect them into a graphic novel. You know, I could do 2 or 3 stories, like a trilogy, and call it something after I put out. And maybe I'd be doing that or working on another project. You know, I don't know. I'm thinking about it. And is that a Kickstarter? Do I find a publisher that doesn't need to own my stuff? Like, the cool thing is that Webtoon paid me to produce something that I own. That's crazy. That's very rare. You know, I was able to finagle that deal. But anyway, so I'm not sure yet. Dave, you were saying something?
Well, I was going to throw in real quick that, you know, I think one of the biggest challenges in comics in general is the format. And we kind of rely on a lot of archaic models, and it's hard to get people to think differently, because I'm guilty of it like anyone else is. I love going to the store every Wednesday and buying monthly books, paying way too much money for them, because that's what I'm used to. And it's part of the thrill. But it would be great if there was something that could kind of exist in between, you know, the 2 formats that we kind of know, the collected volume, or even something digital. And we haven't figured it out yet. And I think it's frustrated both me and Dean. And we're both kind of in the same place where, you know, we really don't know what's next. So much has gotten shaken up in the past couple of years. I was thinking very differently about how I was going to come back to publishing, you know, and I don't even know what to do now. Everything's just kind of amorphous and strange.
And you're working on a 5-issue Night Watchman story right now, aren't you?
Oh yeah, I've got 7 issues laid out actually, and most of them, you know, about half of it is ready to go to print if I had to, but it's just not the right time. And they'll come out soon, but you know, we're not quite there yet. And there've just been a lot of little things along the way, just, you know, personal struggles, you know, COVID notwithstanding, just a lot of little things have come up, and you know, everyone's working really hard. And that's the thing about comics, is you put a lot of effort into it for something that, you know, people pay $5 for and read in 10 seconds. And you're like, oh my God, if they only knew the pain.
I'm waiting for Raven to chime in.
No,
right on.
I'm just over here agreeing.
Yeah, and
okay, right on. Good.
No, but for a $4 or $5 comic, you're getting 20, maybe 24 pages of story. You might as well do a 64-page comic for $15, and it has more value actually, and you get it done in one story, right? Usually,
right?
Sure.
That's the direction I want to go in as an indie artist. Is like, I don't know how. Well, Eric had a tough time recently. Eric Larson, you know, with having writer's block, and with COVID, you know, I understand COVID is notwithstanding, as we say, but still, he's producing a regular series. Like, I don't know how he can do after 20, 60 issues. Like, you know, how's he doing that? That's hard. I couldn't do that. So as I grow older, I'm like, you know what? Let me tell a story in 64 pages or 40 or whatever, you know, and then maybe come out with once a year or something, or if I'm lucky, twice a year. And that could be a plan. You know, I think that the days of indie comics trying to do what Marvel and DC are having a tough time doing are gone. You know, like, I don't know how Dark Horse, IDW, and all these other publishers can even dare to publish a 4 or 5 issue miniseries where the second issue numbers drop in half, and why publish a 3rd issue and wait for the trade, right? And then, like, if you want to keep it on topic, I briefly read something about how Comixology is having problems because I think they created an update that's not very good. And
I could go into that. I'm very sorry.
What happened? That's what I'm saying. Like,
well, basically, Amazon decided that they wanted to integrate Comixology with the Amazon storefront, so they're eliminating Comixology as a platform. And so they have created a really bad storefront when they had a perfectly good working one, and they have changed the reader app for your devices into the Kindle reader, which is awful for reading comics. So it's hopefully these are teething problems, but Amazon, they're just going to keep it this way forever, and it will be bad.
And I heard that a lot of people who had like a lot of comics downloaded, suddenly those were gone, and they have to re-download everything.
Yeah, so when they changed the app over to the new version, it required everything to be re-downloaded. But not only that, It did not retain like whether or not you've already read something. So for someone like me who has 3,500 comics, I now have to manually go through and mark them all red so they don't all appear in my library.
Wow.
It's really obnoxious, yes.
Okay, well, again,
That said,
I mean,
it's still the highest profile way to get digital comics, which is...
Right, and there's a lot of merit, obviously, to the digital world we live in right now, to look at comics that way. I personally don't, and maybe it keeps my reading lighter because of that. Like, like for me, my favorite thing right now is like Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' Reckless series. Like you get a whole story, you read it, and it takes maybe 40 minutes. It's great. I love it.
Well, just talking about the whole formatting thing with doing miniseries and turn them into trade paperbacks, I thought the whole premise was that you did a miniseries first to pay for making the comic, and then putting out the trade to, keep it in print and reprint it.
Right? That's supposed to be the gravy, the trade, or the collection, or the deluxe edition, whatever. But how is not selling issues 3, 4, and 5 barely like not in the black helping you? And everybody's waiting for the trade, so you're literally killing trees for no reason.
I'm almost the opposite, where I hate to see everything go to trade because there's certain comics I just want to try out. Now I don't mind plunking down $4. If I like it, then I'll stick with it. But it might be a bigger decision to drop $15 on something. So
I personally think the art of the cliffhanger is lost when everything's a graphic novel.
Oh, it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And guys agree, but it's funny. Every 5 pages of 4.5 seasons of Red Hook, I had to come up with a mini cliffhanger. Even if it's just asking a question that gets answered next chapter. Holy crap, did I learn about cliffhangers? Because that's one of the ideas, is to keep them coming back,
Right.
And that's not even, like, cliffhangers should be 2 or 3 in a whole story. Try to do that in 25 of those in a 26-chapter comic is bananas, I could take a break from cliffhangers myself.
I think it's okay. Oops, sorry, Craig, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All I was going to say is I think it's totally acceptable to explore less frequent, more short form storytelling.
Yep.
Again, talking as an aging comic artist myself, got a lot of aging comic artist friends. You just get to that point where you just want to shit the story out and you don't want to draw it out. And it's kind of one of those things where I think there are some things you can point to that publishing models where it comes out like quarterly. Headlopper from Image, I'm thinking of. But it comes out quarterly and it's oversized. So you get a larger chunk, but that every story arc is only 4 issues and you're only getting those 4 issues a year. But when you get those 4 issues, you get a bigger chunk. I just think there's all kinds of different ways to approach it. And you shouldn't, like you said, you shouldn't ever feel like you have to ape the Marvel DC model. It barely works for them. So
not barely work for them. They don't need to do that.
Right.
Why have they been doing that? Like, just do 6. First of all, you don't need 10 Batman books. Do 1 monthly Batman book if you need to have a Batman book, and then have like certain creatives or creators or certain talent come in and do their thing with Batman, because that's what you're really reading is when you like a writer, when you like an artist. You just want to see them do their Batman. You don't care about continuity. You can have 1 continuity book for whatever reason that is anymore, because things have changed since when that model started. When that was our blockbusters. That was our movies and television where a man could fly. Now they're competing with really great movies and television that are being made today, right? Now it's IP farm comics,
Right.
And so with that in mind, as a comics creator, lean in on what makes comics cool and take a little bit of time with it, so that when you indulge it as a reader, you're enjoying it for the format, for the medium. Not because you're looking at something that might be an HBO show one day. Who cares? Like, enjoy the comic for what it is. You mentioned Fay before. That's what he's doing with Cobra. That's a comic book, Maybe it could be a TV show. I don't care. It's a comic book,
Yeah. I follow Tom Scholey's Patreon, which is amazing to me. I don't know if you've seen it but he does these he can do intricate strips that are 48 pages, or he'll do a 5-page almost stick figure strip that's stripped down, but it's just concepts thrown at a wall using the medium, using different techniques, and it's so much fun. And I just follow him because I enjoy him as a creator, and I don't mind spending $5 a month to just see what he's got going on. It's all digital, but it's just another way of doing it. I don't even need like a 22-page comic. Give me 5 pages today, 7 pages next week or whatever. Show me some behind the scenes stuff, some pinups. That's what's fun for me now. And it's something I would never have thought of.
Like that's no joke. Like there's a lot going on there. It's lifting the veil between, creator, creation, and community, building that community. It's being experimented, being allowed to experiment. Like I consider the idea of doing a Patreon too, because listen, Marvel DC isn't going to hire me. I mean, if they do, it's going to be a few pages here or there, or do a retro thing. But if they want a retro thing, they're going to get Mike Allred. They're not going to get me. Yes, I have done that, but I'm aging out in a lot of ways. I'm also not doing any kind of comics that are like new, like the new comics. I'm not doing that, and I never slowed down to a manga pace in my work. I still, I grew up on Marvel 2-in-1, where you got a whole story in 22 pages, So, I've developed certain shortcuts and shorthands, because in a lot of ways, that's what cartooning is essentially, is a shorthand. But yeah, I am thinking about the crowdfunding Patreon kind of, world right now, and see if I can make a dent or any kind of living at some point. And maybe that's what will yield the print edition 64-page story or whatever for a market. I don't know. And I do think about, and I've talked about this with Dave a lot, like, certain creators or solo creators are trying to do their thing, but then you need a publisher. You need someone out there that has those tentacles, has those, they're spinning those plates and making those relationships with retailers, distributors, printers. A lot of stuff that the creator doesn't want to deal with, and creating some kind of partnership in that way.
Yeah, it's really important to get out of your bubble. I mean, there's certain groups, and all right, we're all part of the Jack Kirby Appreciation Club, but there's a ton of other people in the audience that aren't, and need to know or see your work and get turned on to it, because there's a finite group here, and it's
right.
It's crazy. But I think we have any more questions, or should we start wrapping it up? I do want to talk about some things kind of in the pipeline for you guys. I know for you, Dean, you've got I think a Fox one-shot through Archie coming up.
So first of all, thanks for talking about, this Savage Dragon backup and the Red Hook and all our comics. I really appreciate that. And for, so yeah, recently I just did it's an anthology of, I think, 2 new stories. One written by Vito Del Sante, who co-created The Purple Heart with me. He did a 5-pager, and I wrote and drew a 12-page Fox story. And basically the assignment was, kind of, what do you think the Fox is right now? And I had to think about that. And I had to think about, don't assume anybody read the other 10 issues. Character to new readers, as it were. And yet honor what happened before, And actually, one of the things that I was turned on to the Fox by was the 2 Alex Toth backups that he did in the 80s, which is what turned me on. So I'm trying to pay a little homage to Alex Toth as well. I'm currently just doing an illustration gig, but I saw I saw that Image Comics is publishing a 12-issue anthology series for the 30th anniversary, right?
Yeah.
So can I do 1 page at least, something in this? He came back, why don't you do 1 page per issue of the 12 issues? And I said, well, I don't know if I want to come with 1-page stories. but I could do a 12-page story that's serialized. So I'm doing a 12-page Billy Dog.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Hold on one second. I know your listeners can't see this, but I don't know if we can. But
oh, wow.
First page.
Nice.
I don't know if it's backwards. It's backwards for me. It might be right for you. I don't know.
No, it's right ways for us.
So,
I can't tell because there's no words, but
yeah, the words I digitally added, and
yeah.
So
so I couldn't tell if it was backwards or not.
Yeah, right. But yeah. So I'm getting to revisit and dust off a much beloved character and play with that again. So. And then, I've written some stuff and some plays, and I have another play coming out in the fall, I believe. I love storytelling, so always like.
Nice. What about you, Dave? You have something coming in the pipeline you want to promote, or?
I do. I'm going to launch something on Substack. It's kind of a future noir detective story called Heart and Sin. So if you go to heartandsyn.substack.com, we've got a little preview image up, and you can sign up for the newsletter, and there will be much more to come. Also, I want to interject. I saw in the comments you wanted to ask us what our favorite dragon characters were, and I just wanted to throw in mine.
Yeah, I think, part of it, not just to jump in, we kind of jumped the gun, but did want to talk a little bit about your kind of relationship with Savage Dragon that you're still collecting or not, or just checking in and what some of your favorite aspects or characters are, just to tie it in with the FINcast.
Right on. Well, I've been picking up monthly to obviously support Larson because he's been so good to me and to Dean. But my favorite character of all time is Mako, even though he is long gone. But
he's
No, Craig, he's gone.
You'll be glad to know he's not gone. He's back.
Oh, okay. Well, then, yeah. Awesome.
I think the most recent issue, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah. If you like Mako, you should pick up the most recent stuff. You're in for a treat.
Oh yeah, right. He's right here. Oh my God. You know what? I went right to my story like an asshole.
We're in the issue. I think that he comes back.
Yes, you are.
Eric's talked to us about it, and a lot of that is just kind of being annoyed with the whole King Shark Suicide Squad thing that looks exactly like Mako, and he's like, right, I should bring this character back, but
yeah,
but it is a cool visual.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Do you have a moment in time? Mako's your favorite character. Do you have a moment in time in the book? We call them like Savage Dragon eras, or whatever, that just really like sticks with you.
Oh, well, man, I don't know if this is another asshole answer, but you know what? I love it when he showed up in the Max. That was one of my favorite Max issues.
That is just fine.
Does that count?
That is just fine. We love that issue.
All right, awesome.
Where were you guys at the start of Image Comics? I think, Dean, you're just a little bit older than me. I was in high school. I think you probably early 80s, you're already in the industry, right? Working with Howard.
Yeah, I'll be 55 in May. So, yeah, no, I was in the 87 was the first time I got published. I believe it was 87. And I was working with Howard Chaykin, Walt Simonson, and Bill Sienkiewicz in 1985. 17 going to 18. I was their assistant.
Wow. What a crew.
Thor, Elektra Assassin, New Mutants.
Man, you look back at that, it's such a golden age of Marvel Comics.
Incredible. And yeah, I remember when Image started, and I remember picking up those books. And to be honest, most of them weren't my cup of tea. It wasn't my thing. I wasn't nothing against McFarlane's Spider-Man, but it wasn't my thing.
I agree.
Spider-Man was Spider-Man. And then, of course, Ditko Romita, and Romita Jr. even. But yeah, no, it was like that overdrawn, overwrought, angsty type of thing. Like, I get why it worked in Dark Knight Returns, and I get what, in Watchmen when things got a little angsty, but that was more of a commentary, not only about what comics could be, where they could go, but also, what's happening in the world. And then the biggest mistake comics made was to try to keep aping that over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. I love C.C. Beck's Shazam. That to me is what a superhero is, or Fantastic Four is my favorite comic book. But when Image started, I definitely picked up a lot of those first issues. In fact, and I've come to meet and like Rob Liefeld, but when I was younger, I was like, what the hell is this? Like, I just didn't,
Yeah.
And I know he's made fun of a lot, but what I realized in my latter years is that what's great about Rob Liefeld's comics is not only does he have a specific energy, like this kid enthusiasm, right? Like I mentioned before, like turning back to being 12 years old, but which is in a good way. But what's cool about Rob Liefeld's comics is that they're unintimidating. You ever pick up a comic, you're like, I could never do that. Or, oh my God, look at that, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. Like, you cannot, who can draw like that, right? Or when something's really stylistic and how did they find their way? Like Walter Simonson, Bill Sienkiewicz, Mike Mignola, whatever. What was great about Rob Liefeld is that, I think I could do comics too. It inspired you to maybe want to do some rock'em sock'em kind of comics or whatever, And I bet kids got, found their way through a Rob Liefeld comic,
Kind of like the punk rock of comics where it just was, others could do it. It was just.
You just go up there and rock out with your cock out, right?
I think for me, and for the generation, so I'm 45. It was that energy, and I wasn't exposed to. I think you were exposed to kind of some of the late 70s Kirby stuff when it was coming out, and witnessed that. Whereas my first taste of stuff was like, Silvestri X-Men, or Walt Simonson was just ending Thor. So like right around that time is when I was getting into it. And that was exciting to me. And I looking at it was like, man, it was mind blowing. And now as my taste refined through the years and being exposed to the older stuff, I'll take a Kirby or Ditko or some of the more simplistic styles, which are not at all.
Right.
They're just cleaner.
That kind of original gangster. Like I realized if I had to whittle down my library to the era that really impacted me, which is specifically Marvel, I think my Marvel era actually ends with the first Secret Wars. In a way, the 25th anniversary, right? I've read tons of Marvel comics. There's been great comic books in Marvel since. But if I had to make a decision, it is like the 80s was my silver age, even though, and that's Tom Byrne and, Simonson and Frank Miller, right? Like those guys. Of course, there was a golden age of really good indie comics too, But yeah, when Image first launched, and then now specifically going to Savage Dragon, like I read some of that stuff. I never really followed it. I cannot tell you a Savage Dragon arc,
Right.
All I can tell you is in the last 5 to 10 years, probably 5 years, maybe more because of COVID, whatever, his art and his energy and just what he's putting down, Eric Larson and Savage Dragon, like to me, it recommends the purity of comics, and you can criticize it and you can be like, oh my God, there's some weird, funny stuff happening. But it's so purely the joy of comics, Right. You can see it. And I can see him burning out a little bit, like, because he doesn't want to put out a dud, and he's only getting better, Yeah. He's got to deal with his own continuity. So I'll bet after a while it gets very harried and, like, the web of stuff, like he's got to keep in his own head. But whatever he puts down, I just enjoy that. I can't tell you what's really happening after. Sure. But yeah, no, there's a pure joy to Eric Larson's Savage Dragon.
And just to see it grow from the 90s with all the cross hatching and the very extreme look, and you see him refine and just hone in on just the basics of what you need to be a great cartoonist. And I think that's where a lot of people are like, oh, the new Dragon, like his art nowadays isn't what it used to be because it's not hyper detailed to death with a million crosshatches. It's cleaner and conveys action better.
It's so much better. He's only gotten better. So, I mean, I don't want to be a character except maybe Max is the current Savage Dragon, right? Like, no.
Malcolm.
No, what's his name?
Malcolm.
His girlfriend kills me.
Maxine.
Malcolm, yeah, I love her. She's got such a spirit and energy that is hilarious.
Right, and the thing is, he's not afraid to make those cartoony faces. You know, like you can mix realistic with hyper,
right?
You know, stylistic features, which is great fun in comics. And it's like, why aren't we doing more? Why aren't artists taking advantage of that more? But yeah, I think we. Go ahead.
Oh, let me just throw this in here.
Sure.
I guess
I'm
the baby. I'm the baby of the group. I'm 38. I'll be 39 next month. I came to Image a couple years into it.
You're the same age as me.
Oh, okay, cool. So I wasn't there for the beginning, but it was the holy trinity of the Savage Dragon, Wildcats, and Max cartoon shows that brought me to the comics.
Hell yes.
So I just wanted to throw that in.
Max was fantastic. I mean,
it was incredible.
What a pleasure to look at that comic. Yeah. And again, that was Sam Keith just doing some crazy stuff. Just, it wasn't quite a superhero comic. It was like, what is this? The different types of media he was using. It just real fun. It was mind blowing to a teenage kid. Like it was just so new.
And the last thing I'll say is I just want to say personally, Eric Larson, thank you so much for bringing Mako back. I'm so happy. I'm leaving this interview much happier than I was at the beginning. And thank you again for the opportunity to do this backup story and for it to be featured in an issue with Mako.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys joining our podcast. This was a lot of fun.
I'm not letting him go yet. I'm not letting him go yet.
Go ahead.
Oh, shit.
I'm sorry. I got my question I get to ask. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Gentlemen, I always ask every cartoonist that we have on the FINcast these same kind of generic questions. This is one generic question, so you both get a crack at it. Before I ask you the generic question, I always ask every cartoonist. I just want to throw this out there. You were both sort of talking about sort of being in the weeds on publishing models or whatever else. Just as someone who is currently doing the subscriber site model where you make the comic, people just get like a page here and there as you finish it, and they pay you monthly, and you just chit chat with them and you throw up sketches and stuff. It's awesome. You get to build great community you get to really connect with your readers that way, and they're paying you to be a part of the process. And when the print book comes out, they still want that. And so I recommend that to any cartoonist. There are many more cartoonists way more successful than me doing it. Look at Ed Pisker with Red Room and Michelle Fife with Copra. So search your hearts. You know this is true. But at any rate, that's just my statement to you, fellow cartoonists. My generic question I ask every cartoonist is, gentlemen, of your own properties, so, we're talking Red Hook, Night Watchman, what's your dream merch?
Oh, dream merch. Action figures, hands down.
Hell yeah.
Oh, so we're not talking, merch, not like a TV show.
Oh, it could be a TV show if you want like Michelle said he wanted a video game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like I don't play with toys. I love toys. I don't care about T-shirts and toys and that kind of stuff. I feel like, and I bet you a video game would really blow up, but I can't imagine. Well, maybe you can figure something out. But I just love storytelling mediums to the point where I would love to see the Red Hook as a TV show. I've been talking to someone about the idea of doing an animation, but I'm also thinking about live action, to be honest. I love and I think it could work. So
I could see it.
My merch is I don't know, the DVD of the TV show or the movie, the Blu-ray.
Right on. Thank you for indulging that question.
I feel like it's as good a time as any to sell superhero properties too, because it's like, people got the Marvel or the DC or, Netflix snapping up Mark Millar stuff or whatever. It's like everyone's looking for that next hot property.
They need to come for the indie stuff.
The cool thing is that Marvel and DC, whether you think it's a deluge or can create a glut, is they've now absolutely created the multimedia hunger for the superhero genre. And what's cool about the superhero genre is that guess what it encompasses? Crime, science fiction, fantasy, and romance. It's all genres.
Right.
However you want to parse it out, I mean, you saw WandaVision. You saw Winter Soldier and the Falcon. You just saw, oh God, what was the recent one?
Hawkeye. Yeah.
And like, look how great Peacemaker. Right? Like, and they all encompass all those parts of the genre, but they've done so differently.
Right.
Marry Me is a 15-year-old webcomic about romance, and it's releasing into theaters with Jennifer Lopez and Owen Wilson. So I'm saying we're in different times.
Yep. And you know, it's funny. I was just watching on, I think it's Netflix. There's on Netflix. There's a TV show called All of Us Are Dead.
Oh, right, yeah.
A webtoon series, and it's Korean, but they've done, you know, English, not subtitles. What do you call it? The voiceover.
Dubbing.
And it's basically a high school with zombies, right? A zombie outbreak, apocalypse. And what was funny is when they started making references to, oh, is this a zombie apocalypse? You mean like Train to Busan? You know? Which, of course, makes sense. It's Korean, right? But there's no Walking Dead. There's no Night of the Living Dead. There's no George Romero reference, you know? It's the current reference.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm bringing that up is just like I'm touting how superheroes are here to stay. So is the zombie, you know, you can still make zombie shows and movies, even though Walking Dead's been around for 10 years now, you know? And they thought for a long time, oh, we can't do that. No, you can continue doing it. It's how you do it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Absolutely. Well, cool.
Yeah.
You got anything else, Raven?
No, sir.
Jim?
No, I think we got a really good interview.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the time that we had together. I loved, you know, picking both your brains to understand your concepts and your heroes. I look forward to, you know, reading up on the last 2 seasons, and I think I'm gonna run out and order that Fox one shot and go back and buy the back issues because I'm pretty hooked on your stuff now. And I mean, the Red Hook stuff blew me away, and I can't recommend it enough to the Savage Dragon readers out there. So hopefully our listeners will. The crazy thing is it's all free on the webtoon, so it's you know, they can pick it up or they can buy I think it's volume 1 and 2 at Image, right? Which brings you through the second season or third season. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Craig, and again, I really appreciate you guys talking to us.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Awesome. Appreciate it. Let's do it again when we get some more Red Hook or other projects in the pipeline.
Anytime.
Thank you, fellas. Take it easy.
All right.